Earlier this year in April, the Secretary of Defense, or the Secretary of War, sat before the Senate Armed Services Committee, faced questions from members skeptical of the war in Iran, and told them, and I'm quoting his testimony, "I believe we do have the support of the American people." He was wrong. Not arguably wrong, not wrong as a matter of interpretation or my opinion. He was wrong as a matter of arithmetic. By June, the polling had become unambiguous. According to a careful analysis of more than 150 public opinion surveys across 7 major American conflicts, the war in Iran is now the most unpopular war in the history of the United States. It sits at negative 32% net support, 32 points more Americans against it than for it. That is below the worst reading ever recorded for the Vietnam War. And unlike every other war in the American record, this one has never had majority support for even a single day. It began underwater, and it has stayed underwater. Roughly 2 out of 3 Americans want it ended as soon as possible. So hold those two things next to each other. The people running the war say the people support it. The people say they do not and have never. Now, regarding the most unpopular war in U.S. history, I want to be a little bit careful here and precise because that polling is one analysis synthesis and the methodology stitches together different kinds of survey questions. So I will not pretend it's beyond all dispute. But the direction of support for this war is not in dispute. As an honest reading of all the numbers show, this is a deeply, historically unpopular war, and it's prosecuted by a government that is insisting otherwise. Now, here's the part that should make every student of history sit up. We are right now in the middle of this thing. We're being told a story about why it is necessary, about what the enemy did and what the stakes are. And if there's one lesson the American record teaches with brutal consistency, it is this. In the middle of the war, the story we are being told and the story that later turns out to be true are frequently not the same story. Remember the Maine? In 1898, an explosion sank an American battleship in Havana Harbor. The press screamed that Spain had done it. The country went to war. And the most careful investigations concluded later the explosion was an internal accident, a coal bunker fire. It wasn't a Spanish mine at all, which, by the way, the Spanish denied all claims that it was even at that time. Remember the Gulf of Tonkin? In 1964, a reported attack on American destroyers stampeded Congress into the resolution that became the legal foundation for the entire Vietnam War. And we now know, from the government's own declassified records, that the second attack, the one that triggered the resolutions, almost certainly never happened. And remember the WMDs, the weapons of mass destruction in 2003. The United States invaded a country on the strength of confident official claims that an arsenal, when the dust had settled, did not exist. The Maine, the Tonkin, the WMDs, 3 wars, 3 official stories, 3 later reckonings in which the official story collapsed. I could name several others too, including the pretext for the Mexican-American War in 1846 and the spot resolutions, the documented British propaganda in the buildup to the U.S. entry into World War I, the obfuscation and lies behind our initial covert entry into Iran in 1953, and Libya and Yemen and Somalia and on and on. So I ask you the only honest question a free citizen can ask while a war is being sold to him. What are we not being told about Iran? What will we learn 5, 10, or 20 years from now that we are not permitted to know today? And who exactly is going to be the one to tell us? That last question is the subject of today's episode, because the people who eventually tell us what we were not supposed to know, they have a name and an ancient lineage, and they pay a terrible price for the telling. On Saturday, we met them in their oldest form. Today, we meet them in ours. I am Jeff Kellick, and this is the Consequential Actions Podcast. This is episode 3, part B of the series Self-Evident, The Road to 1776. Our contemporary application episode connecting the historic principles we explored on Saturday to the policy debates and liberty movement of today. This past weekend, we examined the Hebrew inheritance, covenant, and consent as the foundation of legitimate government. The radical idea that even the king stands under the law and the prophetic vocation of the man who confronts power with the truth and pays for it. Today we ask, does American government still operate by covenant and consent? Or has it drifted toward the very thing Samuel warned the elders about? Who carries the prophet's vocation now? And what does it cost them? Let us begin.
Welcome to the Consequential Actions Podcast. Here we ask a simple question of the history and the actions that have shaped our lives.
Did this leave us more free or more governed? Because what we do not know can be used to govern us.
And what we choose to ignore always will.
Let us reset the standard from this past episode before I apply it, because everything today is measured against it. The Hebrew tradition gave the West a figure unlike anything in the ancient world. The prophet, who walks up to the king with no army, no office, no institutional power of any kind, and tells him to his face that he has broken the law that binds them both. Nathan walks up to David the king, the most powerful man in Israel, and tells him a story about a rich man who stole a poor man's lamb. David erupts in fury and pronounces a death sentence on the rich man. And Nathan turns to him and says 4 words, "Thou art the man." The king has just condemned himself under the same law that binds the poorest farmer in the kingdom. Elijah does the same to Ahab in the vineyard Ahab murdered to obtain. The pattern we said on Saturday recurs through the entire prophetic literature. The king sins, the prophet confronts, the law remains supreme. And we drew from Samuel's warning the structural insight at the heart of it. When the elders demanded a king to fight their battle, Samuel did not warn about bad kings. He warned them about the office itself. That a king, any king, by the nature of the office, would take their sons for his wars, take their harvest for his treasury, and in the end, take the people themselves as servants. Avadim, the word for slaves. The danger was not the man. The danger was the unaccountable office and what it would do to a free people who established it. Now, I want to add something today that we did not draw out on Saturday because it is the crux of this entire episode. Across the first 3 weeks, the Founders teachers have handed us not one, but 2 different warnings about how free peoples die. And the 2 are not exactly the same. The first warning is Polybius. We met it in episode 2, the anacyclosis, the cycle of constitutions, the wheel on which every form of government decays into its corrupt twin and is overthrown. Monarchy rots into tyranny, aristocracy into oligarchy, democracy into mob rule. And round it turns. Polybius' warning is structural. It is about the forms of government, the institutions, the machinery of the Constitution, and how that machinery degrades over time. The second warning is Ibn Khaldun. We heard this one on the most recent episode. Asabiyya, the social cohesion that binds the people together, and its slow decay across generations. The first generation, hardened by struggle, possesses fierce solidarity. The third and fourth, softened by comfort, mistaking inherited safety for personal achievement, lose the cohesion that built everything they enjoy. And the civilization hollows out from the inside, wealthy and refined, and no longer able to hold itself together. Ibn Khaldun's warning is not about the machinery. It is about the people who operate it. It is about what comfort does to vigilance. And here's why this matters more than any other single idea in the series. The founders could build a machine against Polybius. That is exactly what the Constitution is. The separations of powers, the checks and balances, the mixed Constitution we examined 2 weeks ago. All of it is engineered to answer Polybius's wheel, a structure designed to catch each form of decay before it completes and to slow the cycle, perhaps indefinitely. The machine still stands. 2.5 centuries later, the structure the founders built against Polybius is still standing. But there is no machine against Ibn Khaldun. There cannot be. You cannot build an institution that manufactures vigilance in a comfortable people. You cannot engineer a check or a balance that forces a distracted citizenry to care. Social cohesion, civic attention, the willingness to bear the cost of self-government and to be inconvenienced by the truth. Those are not structural. They are human. They have to be chosen and rechosen by living people in every single generation, or they evaporate. And when they evaporate, the machinery the founders built keeps standing there, perfect and empty, while the substance drains out of it. It's exactly as we saw in episode 2, the forms of the people's house still standing while the voice of the people drained away. So hold this. The Constitution is the answer to Polybius. The prophet, the human being, willing to walk up to power and tell the truth at terrible cost, is the only available answer to Ibn Khaldun. The prophet is not a mechanism. The prophet is the living conscience that resupplies the vigilance the machine cannot generate on its own, which is why every free society needs its prophets, and why every power that wishes to decay in peace must find a way to silence them. I asked in the open, who is going to tell us about what we are not being told in Iran? Let me answer by telling you who told us about the last several wars and what it cost them. I'll start with the cleanest case in the entire American record because it is the one closest to Nathan. In 1971, a man named Daniel Ellsberg, who had worked inside the defense establishment at the highest levels, who had helped prepare the very studies in question, did something that ended his career and risked the rest of his life. He copied and released what became to be known as the Pentagon Papers, the government's own secret internal history of the Vietnam War. And what that internal history revealed was devastating, because it was not the enemy's secret. It was ours. It documented that the administration after administration had known the war was going far worse than the public was told, had expanded it in ways the public was not informed of, and had said one thing to the American people while the classified record said another. Ellsberg did not expose the enemy. He exposed the government's own lying to its own people about its own war. That is the prophetic function in its purest modern form. It is Nathan exactly. A man with inside knowledge walks up to the most powerful government on earth and says, in effect, "Thou art the man. You have lied, and here is the proof in your own hand." And the government's response was to prosecute him under the Espionage Act of 1917, a law written to punish spies who sell secrets to enemies in wartime, now turned against a man whose only offense was telling the American people the truth about a war their own government was misrepresenting. Ellsberg faced a possible 115 years in prison. His case collapsed only because the government's own misconduct in pursuing him, the burglary of his psychiatrist's office, the illegal wiretapping, was so egregious that the judge dismissed the charges. He was nearly destroyed for telling the truth. He happened to survive. That is the vocation, and that is the price. Now move forward to the case that defines our own movement. In 2013, Edward Snowden, a contractor working inside the National Security Agency, revealed the United States government was secretly collecting telephone records of essentially every American, not targeted suspects, but the whole population, on an ongoing daily basis, sweeping up the metadata of hundreds of millions of people who were suspected of nothing at all. Snowden's critics call him a traitor who fled to a hostile foreign country with stolen secrets. And that is a serious charge that deserves a serious answer rather than dismissal. So here's the decisive fact. The central program Snowden exposed, the bulk collection of America's phone records, was later examined by a federal appeals court, the Ninth Circuit. And in 2020, that court ruled unanimously that the program was unlawful, that it violated the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, that it violated the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. And listen to this. The court found that the public statements government officials had made defending the program were, in the court's own words, inconsistent with the classified record. The officials had not told the truth when asked about it in front of Congress under oath. The oversight board that studied the program concluded it had been essentially useless, never having stopped the attacks it was sold as preventing. So strip it down. Snowden revealed a program. The program was later ruled illegal and probably unconstitutional. The officials who ran it had misrepresented to the public in front of Congress. And whatever else you want to say about the man and his choices, and there's plenty to debate about how he did it and what he did, the thing he exposed was the government breaking the law against its own people and lying about it. That is not espionage. That is the prophetic function. And the government charged him too under the Espionage Act of 1917. He has lived in exile ever since. The man who revealed unlawful government conduct cannot come home. The officials who conducted it never faced a courtroom at all, even the ones who lied directly to Congress under oath. Hold that inversion in your mind, because the liberty test is going to come back to it. And the third case, the hardest and the messiest, because honesty requires the messy one. Julian Assange, through WikiLeaks, published vast troves of classified American military and diplomatic material, including footage that records the documented conduct in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars that the government would much rather have kept in the dark. Assange is the messiest of all three, and I will not pretend otherwise. His case is tangled up with questions about his methods, about whether he's a journalist or a source, about a foreign nationality, and a long, strange legal saga. He is not the clean martyr that Ellsberg is. The defense before critique standard requires me to say this plainly. The case against Assange is more colorable than the case against Ellsberg. And a serious person can hold real reservations about that. But watch what actually happened, because the precedent is the thing. In 2024, after years confined, 7 years in an embassy, and then 5 more years in a high-security British prison fighting extradition, Assange finally pleaded guilty to a single count under, once again, the Espionage Act of 1917. And he was released on time served. And here's what the press freedom organizations, from the Committee to Protect Journalists to Amnesty International, warned about the plea. For the first time, a publisher, not a government employee who stole secrets, but a publisher who received and released information, was convicted under the Espionage Act for the act of publishing. That's the thing journalists do. The thing the First Amendment was written to protect. The precedent now exists. Receive and publish information the government wants hidden, and you can be prosecuted as a spy. Whatever you think of Assange the man, that precedent reaches every journalist who would ever expose what power once buried. Do you see the pattern now? 3 men, 3 wars worth of hidden truth, and 1 law, the same law. The Espionage Act of 1917 turned in every case not against the spies selling secrets to enemies, but against the men who told the American people what their own government was doing. The prophet confronts power with the truth, and power, which can no longer simply kill the prophet, has found a more civilized instrument. It brands him as a spy. It exiles him or cages him or bleeds him dry in court for years until he breaks. The hat is fancier now. The seal is official. But the structure is exactly the one Saturday described. The truth teller without office, standing against power and paying for it. Let me briefly turn to a different kind of case because it shows the same principle from another angle. There's a controversy that will not die over the official handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. The records surrounding a man who trafficked the powerful and whose death in federal custody and the documents around his network have been the subject of years of partial releases, redactions, reversals, and so many unanswered questions. Now, I'm going to be disciplined here on this episode because this is exactly the kind of subject where a careful man and a conspiracy theorist can start to sound alike. And I intend to stay on the careful side of that line. I'm not going to stand here and make specific accusations about specific people that I cannot prove. I'm not going to substitute a satisfying story for the established fact. The rule of law exists precisely to protect even the powerful and the loathsome from trial by rumor. And a libertarian who believes in due process has to mean it even when the accused is someone he despises. So let me make the only claim I can actually defend. And it is a claim about the obfuscation rather than its contents. And here it is. When power expends visible, sustained effort to keep something dark, when the releases come redacted, then reversed, then delayed, then partial, then promised, and withheld, the obfuscation itself becomes evidence. Not evidence of any particular allegation, evidence that there is something there worth hiding. Because the historical record is brutally consistent on this point. The official, "there is nothing to see here," has preceded the discovery of something to see over and over and over again. There was nothing to see at the Gulf of Tonkin until the declassified record showed otherwise. There was nothing to see in the NSA's phone program until a federal court ruled it illegal. The pattern of American history is not that official denials are usually true. The pattern is a sustained official obfuscation is usually hiding something. So when a free people see the machinery of concealment working that hard, the right response is not to invent the answer. It is to demand the light. Transparency is the answer to obfuscation. And that demand connects straight back to Saturday, when Ahab seized Naboth's vineyard and did it through the proper legal forms. A rigged tribunal, false witnesses, a process that looked lawful and produced a murder. The powerful using the machinery of law to do the work that law forbids and dressing it in procedure. That is the oldest inversion in the book. And the prophet's job then and now is to walk into the vineyard and name it. Now, that is as far as I will take it today on this episode. The point is not the contents of any particular file. The point is that a free people do not let power decide what they are allowed to know. So let me draw these threads to the question Saturday set for today. Does American government still operate by covenant and consent? Think about what we have actually looked at. A war that 2 out of 3 Americans want ended, prosecuted by officials who insist the people are behind it. A historical pattern in which the public is told one story while the truth runs the other way. A surveillance program that swept up the whole population, ruled illegal, defended with statements a court found untrue. And in every case, the people who exposed the gap between the official story and the truth were prosecuted as spies. Now recall what a covenant is. On Saturday, we said it is the opposite of a decree, a binding agreement that requires the consent of both parties. the structure by which a free people constitutes a government that answers to it. The covenant assumes the people know what they are consenting to. It assumes the government tells them the truth so that their consent means something. A government that makes war the people never wanted and hides what it is doing so that they cannot withdraw a consent they never truly gave, that government has not technically dissolved the covenant. The forms are all still there. We still vote. But the substance of consent requires knowledge. And a government that systematically controls what the people are allowed to know has hollowed that covenant exactly the way the 435 cap hollowed the people's house. The shell remains consistent. The thing itself is being drained. And here are where both warnings come due at once. The hollowing of consent is a structural failure. Polybius' machinery slipping, war powers drained from Congress that is supposed to hold them, oversight that does not oversee. But it is also something machinery cannot fix because it is sustained by us, by a comfortable people too distracted to demand the truth, too busy to be inconvenienced by it, too soft, in Ibn Khaldun's terms, to do the hard work of holding people accountable. Both deaths working at once, the structure failing and the people letting it. And standing in the gap, almost alone, the prophet, the whistleblower, the one who still insists on telling us what we would, in our own comfort, rather not have to know. Let us apply the liberty test, and today, let us apply it not to the original wrong, but to the punishment, to what the state does to the truth teller. The test asks first, could an individual morally do this thing to another individual? So picture it. A man discovers that someone powerful is doing something secret and unlawful that harms a great many people. He tells the harmed people the truth about what is being done to them. Now ask, would any of us say that man who exposed the wrongdoing is the criminal and the one who committed the wrongdoing is the victim? Could you, as a private individual, justly punish a person whose only act was to tell you a true thing you had a right to know, while the person who did the unlawful thing he exposed goes free? You could not. No honest individual could. To punish the messenger of a true and necessary warning while the wrongdoer he exposed walks away. That's not justice. It is the protection of power against accountability. It inverts the moral universe. It makes the truth teller the criminal and the lawbreaker the victim. And the second question, if an individual cannot justly do this, can a group of individuals delegate the government power to do it? Can the people hand the state an authority none of them possess? The authority to punish the man who told them the truth in order to protect the officials who lied to them? They cannot. You cannot delegate a power you never held. No one has the right to punish a true warning, so no number of people and no government they create can acquire that right by majority vote or by official seal. If the answer to both is no, and it is, then the prosecution of the man whose disclosure revealed the government's own lawbreaking is not justice. It is aggression dressed in the robes of national security, regardless of how grave the official seal or how solemn the courtroom. The fancy hat here reads classified. The larger mob is the whole apparatus of secrecy that insists the people have no right to know what is being done in their name and with their money. And the act underneath the costume is the same act ancient Israel committed when it killed the prophets who told it the truth. The silencing of the warning to protect the comfort of the powerful. The costume has gotten better. The act has not changed. I will add one honest qualification here because the text demands it. This does not mean every leak is sacred or every leaker is a prophet. A man who indiscriminately dumps secrets that get people killed or sells them to an enemy for money is not Nathan. He is something else, and the state may justly answer for it. The prophetic function is specific. It is the exposure of the lawbreaking of power. The test is not whether secrets were revealed. The test is whether the revelation showed the powerful breaking the law against the people. When it does, the man who revealed it stands in the oldest and most honorable tradition the West has got. He holds the king to account under the law. And we are prosecuting him as a spy. So let us bring the episode home. The Constitution is the answer to Polybius. The founders built it as a machine against the decay of forms, and it is a magnificent machine. And against all odds, it is still standing. But I've tried to show you tonight that the machine was never the whole story, and the founders knew it was never the whole story. Franklin asked, what kind of government they have given us? Benjamin Franklin, when asked what kind of government they had given us, is supposed to have answered, a republic, if you can keep it. If you can keep it. He did not say a republic, and the machinery will keep itself. He put the keeping on us. Because the second death, Ibn Khaldun's death, the rotting of people's vigilance from the inside, has no mechanical cure. There's no clause you can add to the Constitution that forces a comfortable nation to care whether it is being lied to. There is only the prophet, the whistleblower, the individual who, in every generation, is willing to walk up to power and to say the true and costly thing. And the rest of us, who decide whether to honor him or destroy him for it. That is the covenant we are actually being asked to keep. Not the parchment covenant only, but the living one. The agreement that we will remain the kind of people who want to know the truth, who protect the ones who tell it, and who refuse to let power decide what we are allowed to see. Ellsberg kept it, and he was nearly destroyed. Snowden kept it, and lives in exile. Assange kept it in his tangled and imperfect way, and lost years of his life to a prison cell. They told us what they were not supposed to know about wars our government was misrepresenting, and the question the Open asked, what are we not being told about Iran, and who will tell us, is really a question about whether there will still be people willing to pay that price, and whether we will still be the kind of people who deserve them. I will leave you with the one genuinely hopeful thing, because this series always ends in hope, and the hope here is real. The cycle is a pattern, not a sentence. Ibn Khaldun described a tendency, not an iron law. A people can always choose to recohere, to wake up, to pay attention, to demand the light, to honor the truth teller instead of crucifying him. The prophet is the standing proof of it. As long as one human being is still willing to walk into the vineyard and say, "Thou art the man," the decay has not won. The voice is not gone. It has only grown rare and expensive. And whether it goes silent or not, as it always was, is up to us. On Saturday, episode 4, the thread reaches the man who tied all of these strands together, Thomas Aquinas, and the medieval world that put the inheritance to immediate political use. We will take up the Magna Carta and the principle that even the king is bound by law, made concrete on an English meadow. The natural law doctrine that an unjust law is no law at all, and the early arguments for the right to resist tyranny. The truth teller's vocation we examine tonight is about to acquire a body of law. I am Jeff Kellick, and this has been Episode 3, Part B of Self-Evident, The Road to 1776 on the Consequential Actions podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode and want to follow the series, please subscribe to our Substack page at consequentialactions.com. Here you'll find all our written articles, as well as our previous series on the General Welfare Clause, the New Leviathan, and the Empire of Liberty. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Consequential Actions Podcast for video versions of all podcast episodes. and follow me on X at jkellick or Facebook at Consequential Actions Podcast for updates, discussions, and announcements. We continue to post articles and welcome your participation. Until next time, have a great day.